All right. Welcome to Black Swan Revelations. My name is Shane, and today we're going to go through the entire book of Exodus. So, what I like to do, especially when it comes to the Old Testament, is I like to go through the book and then just share with you some of my insights as we go along. And sometimes I nickname this whenever I go all Black Swanny. That's what I'm talking about. I share my thoughts, my insights, my revelations. This is why I called my channel Black Swan Revelations. I do believe we are nearing the end of grace, and for some reason, the book of Exodus has been on my mind for the past couple of months. As I was going through and finishing up reading the New Testament, because what I do from time to time is I'll just cycle through the whole Bible, I couldn't wait to get to Exodus. So now I finished reading Exodus this morning, and I thought, it'd be a good time to just go through the entire book with you, my audience, and share some of my thoughts, some of my insights, especially when it ties into the rapture, our great exodus from this realm into another realm. We're going to be talking about that on the show today. So welcome to Black Swan Revelations.
You don't see it coming? What you go is safe. What you go is known. One silent shift shatters what you know. Black Swan. You won't see it coming. Black Swan. The shift is already moving. This is Black Swan Revelations.
All right. You know what's interesting about that intro that I created? Gary Gates actually created the music behind it. And I created all the images. I just used story blocks, found a bunch of pieces of footage, and put that all together. And it's funny because I did that a couple of months ago. And that video, that intro, pertains to today like never before. You see carriers moving around. You see people riding in the streets. You see AI. All kinds of stuff in that video. And at the very beginning, what I showed was an image of what I believe is, or who I believe is the Antichrist. The Antichrist obviously is a person, but that's what I wanted to show at the beginning, that he's kind of watching all this stuff unfold and all this. And I just find it interesting that it all goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, where the serpent deceives Eve into partaking of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then from there, that's where we get death. And God said to Adam, if you take of the tree of which I forbid you to take of, you will surely die. Death is imminent. And we know, because of that one action that Adam did, everybody has died since then. But I want to tell you, there's another part of that story. Death doesn't mean you're finished here on earth. Death is actually just the beginning. Because as a Christian, when you receive Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, we are now baptized into his death. were baptized into his death and resurrection. So when we talk about departure, we talk about Exodus, all this stuff, you have to keep in mind all of these things, because this is why the Old Testament was pointing towards Jesus Christ, what he was going to do on the cross. And you can't help but see the cross in the Old Testament. It's layered, it's mixed in, it's all over the place. You can't help but see it. It's actually quite fascinating. So, as a Christian, this is why I always encourage people, read your Bible, read it over and over and over again. It doesn't matter if you spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, 2 hours a day. You're actually cleansing your mind. You're actually washing your mind. You're brainwashing yourself, because you need to be in God's word in order to know how to live your life on a daily basis, how to make decisions. Because there will be times in your life where you're not going to have a chance to pray beforehand. You're not going to be able to say, oh, can I go and pray about this first? Sometimes you're going to have to make a decision on the fly. And this might be for someone out there right now that's maybe you're waffling with your decision-making process. Well, I'm telling you, when you spend time behind closed doors where people don't see you, and you're reading your Bible and you're praying, you will be rewarded openly. And part of those rewards are making quick decisions. Making quick decisions. When we get to Israel, we're going to see that they get rewarded for making a quick decision. What was that? Well, they actually left Egypt in haste. And that's kind of the theme of Israel, is don't look back. Don't look back during the Exodus. Don't want, don't lust, don't covet your former life, your former lifestyle, or your former life. Don't do that. Because these people are basically known as crossed over people, Passover people, which is interesting to me, that you have a whole nation that's basically nicknamed crossed over ones or Passover ones. Because when you think about it, Jesus Christ passed over, I believe, over all the doorposts. And again, if you're looking at the cross, each doorpost got a little bit of blood put on it, and then also the top representing the cross of Jesus Christ, that because of his blood, the destroying angel passed over us to not destroy us. So the whole idea of the Passover comes from the book of Exodus. This is where we see it, and this is where we see it explained and everything. And we're going to go through this, hopefully, in less than 2 hours. But I think what some people appreciate about my Bible studies, that they're unscripted. I don't have any script that I'm following. In fact, I just prefer to open up my Bible and start reading. As sometimes if I go into Bible Gateway, I feel like I'm lost for some reason. I just feel like chapter 1, chapter 2, it feels different than when I'm looking at it on my pages. I don't know if you guys ever notice that. If you have a Bible as long as I have, this Bible is a whopping 2 years old. You get familiar with where things are and by how they feel in your book. You just feel, oh, okay, I can feel where Corinthians is and all this by how worn down it is. And if somebody were to hand you a different Bible, you can't find the verse that you're looking for because you're not familiar with it. And that's sometimes how I feel when I go on to Bible Gateway that even though it's in order, I'm like, I know it's here somewhere, but you have to kind of flip through the pages in order to find it. But in my Bible, I can find stuff a lot easier. So one of the things before we get started, and this is what I want you guys to just kind of put this on the shelf. If we go over to, I think it's Luke chapter 9, I think it is. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, was it Luke 9? One second, maybe it's Luke 21. I'll find it. It'll come to me. I was looking for, I thought it was in Luke 9. The Transfiguration. If somebody knows in, I just wanted to share this quick thing. I thought it was in Luke 9. The Transfiguration of Jesus when he meets Moses and Elijah. And Peter, James, and John are there. Let me just see if I can find it. It's not there. Weird. I was pretty sure it was in Luke. Okay, it'll come to me in a bit. All right, so anyways, Jesus is on the Mount of Transfiguration, and Peter, James, and John are asleep. Surprise, surprise, they fell asleep. And when they woke up, they see Moses and Elijah talking to Jesus about his decease. And if you look up that word decease, it's Exodus in Greek. So that's kind of interesting to me. So we'll tackle that a little bit later, but just hang on to that. Put that in the shelf. I thought it was like Luke 9. Okay, let's go. Let's get started into Exodus. So this is, we're basically leaving off of where in Genesis, Joseph dies. Yeah, Luke 9:28. I was so close. Luke 9. Hang on, let's just look at it real quick here. I thought it was Luke 9:21. Yeah, there. I just missed it. It's Luke 28. Luke 9:28. And it came to pass, it's highlighted in blue. Maybe that's why I couldn't see it. And it came to pass, about 8 days after these sayings, he took Peter, John, and James and went up into a mountain to pray. And he prayed, and the fashion of his countenance was altered. And his raiment was white and glistening. And behold, there talked with him 2 men, which were Moses and Elias, another way of saying Elijah, who appeared in glory and spake of his decease, which he should accomplish at Jerusalem. But Peter and they that were with him were heavy with sleep, and when they were awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men that stood with him. Pretty cool. That's such a cool story. So we know it's Elijah and we know it's Moses standing there talking about his decease and the glory that would follow. So again, when we're talking about decease there, we're talking about Jesus' exit from this world to another world. Basically, he dies on the cross, rises again on the third day, and he'll never die again. He'll never do that same thing again. That was once and for all of our sins, past, present, and future. So at the end of Genesis, we see Joseph, he's dying, and he tells his brothers, he's like, hey, when God is going to deliver you in the future back to the promised land, I want you to take my bones with me, with you guys, which is interesting because it seemed like everyone else was buried in Egypt except for Joseph. Joseph was buried in a coffin, and they took his coffin and buried him with his father, Jacob. I find that fascinating. I never really thought about that until just now. So then there was a new king in Egypt, and this might be hard for people to understand, that after a few years of success, arguably 7 years of success, maybe you can even stretch it out and say 14 years of success, thanks to Joseph, that 430 years later, another king doesn't remember anything about Joseph. It shouldn't be a shock to us, because again, if the Israelites were detestable to the Egyptians, it shouldn't be a stretch for us to go 4 generations plus. They don't remember the works that Joseph did. All they remember is now they're in plenty. They're actually rich right now. And I find that fascinating, because it's kind of like today. Like name 4 presidents ago. We have Trump, Biden, Obama, Clinton, or George. George and Clinton. I get those 2 guys mixed up. It's either Clinton then George, then Obama, I think, for 8 years, then Trump, then Biden, then Trump. And before that, who's before Bush? Clinton? Yes, Clinton. And then before him, Senior? Yeah, there's 2 Bushes. That's it. But ask me about, let me see if I can do my prime minister. We have Carney, Trudeau, Harper, because Trudeau's been around forever. It seems like at least 10 years. That's what makes it difficult. It's easier to remember in pockets of 4 or 8 years. That seems to be easier. But beyond that, like once you start going back into the 80s and 70s, I think it's easier to remember for the presidents, but it gets very difficult. So name the 10th president. It's tough, right? It's tough unless you're studying it in school and all this kind of stuff. It's tough to remember. So imagine going back 400 years. That's even tougher. And why would you study what Joseph did if you can't stand the Israelites? So that's the point that I'm trying to make here, is it shouldn't be a shocker to go, oh, this king never remembered Joseph. As it says here, now there is another king that rose up, a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass, when there falleth out any war, that they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. So here we get introduced to the idea of the word falleth. falling, falleth, fall away. All this kind of stuff starts here. So I always use this as kind of like a whenever I'm going through the King James Bible, I pay attention to words of what I call first mention. So if you see a word like falleth, and you see the context, these people are worried, these Egyptians are worried that if our enemies come, because we're kind of at odds with Israel, there is a chance that they're going to join our enemies and then overthrow us. That's falleth. That's falling away to the enemy, meaning they're switching allegiance. And we see this with King David, where the Philistines, when King David served for a short while amongst the land of the Philistines, he was actually under a king. Meanwhile, he was destroying them. But his generals, the king's generals, were worried that if they were to go to battle against Israel, that David would fall away to Israel, thus making our victory just nothing. Like we'll get defeated. Because what a good time for a hero to come back by beating us down, and they'll take him back with open arms. So the generals were like, didn't they sing a song? Because they have spies all over Israel. That was kind of a known thing to have spies in the land of the Philistines, to have spies in Egypt, to have spies in Israel, in Moab, in Ammon. David had men everywhere. And so did the Philistines. They had spies everywhere. Because they said, didn't we hear the song that these women sang that Saul has killed his thousands and David has killed his 10,000s? Wouldn't this be a good opportunity for him to fall away back to his king? And they just welcome him with open arms. So when you think about the context of falling away, you're talking about switching allegiances. So when Paul talks about this day can't happen until there be like a great falling away, that should be your hint to me that there are going to be many people falling away from God, from the idea of having anything to do with God, and switching allegiances towards the Antichrist. Whether it's the spirit of the Antichrist, whether it's the beast system, the beginning of it, whatever it is, you can't help but see that in North America. You can't help but see that separation happening. And I think arguably you could say it started in the 1800s, where people were saying, you know what, you have to separate church and state. When that wasn't the case at the very beginning, and we're going to be talking about that in Exodus if we can ever get through this book, the idea that church and state was actually mixed. It was actually mixed. So when you think about the tabernacle that Moses is going to build towards the end of Exodus, in the book of Exodus, you have to think of the tabernacle and the whole religious setup of the Levites as almost like a governance, a church, a bank, and a hospital all rolled into one. Because we'll see in the book of Judges, when we get to the book of Judges, or the book of Joshua, I should say, where the land gets divvied up, we see that the Levites actually get refugee cities. So that if people accidentally kill someone, they are allowed to flee to these Levite refuge cities in order for there to be a proper trial that will commence later, because you got to gather witnesses and everything, be a little bit of he said, she said. So they actually, if they can't solve their problems with their own leaders in their own community, They just keep going up the ladder until eventually they get to the Levites, who will decide their fate when it comes to land, purchasing land, buying and selling land. When we get to the book of Leviticus, you're going to understand that Leviticus is basically how to function as a society with laws, with rules and regulations and all kinds of stuff. How to buy land, how to sell land, how to buy and sell animals based on the value of shekels in the sanctuary. All this kind of stuff is going on. So I think in some ways, if you want a book to know how to build a nation, you need the book of Leviticus, and arguably also basically the first 5 books of the Bible. That'll help you build a nation, because you could figure out how to treat people, all kinds of stuff. And it's interesting that our government in Canada is trying to basically not allow us to talk about the book of Leviticus and the book of Exodus. They're trying to get rid of that out of our Bible. They're trying to push this stuff through, and I think it's already here. Because I was talking to a friend the other day, and it's like, oh no, there's no question, it's been passed. So what does that mean? For us in Canada, it basically means if you use the Bible to come against someone or something, so for example, homosexuality, if you use the Bible as your crutch and say, well, the Bible says it's wrong, you could actually get into trouble, because they don't want you to go to the Bible to say that, because that gets us out of actually a lot of trouble if we go, well, I didn't write it, God wrote it. But what they're doing is they're trying to reverse that and say, you can't say that. You can't say it's in your Bible. That is borderline hate crime. And it's coming. It's coming probably sooner than later. So this is why I decided to do Exodus and also Leviticus and do a deep dive on this before we can't do it, before we get shut down. So, yeah, I'm telling you, it's crazy times here. It's crazy times. But we shouldn't back down from this. All right. So we're 28 minutes in, and we're still in chapter 1. It's a pretty good pace. So according to that, there's 40 chapters, about 40 hours we will be done the book of Exodus. So I'm going to try and speed it up, but I think it's important to know where we're kind of standing and how that compares to today as well. But back then, Pharaoh was punishing the Israelites, and the more they punished them, it's like they just continued to spread and be wealthy and have big families and all kinds of stuff. So Pharaoh decides, I think influenced heavily through Satan, that at this time it would be good to speak to the midwives and say that, hey, anytime your people go to help the Israelites when they're having children, whenever the wives are going to give birth, and you see that it is a male child, kill the male child. But these 2 Hebrew midwives, like they were in charge of the Hebrew midwives, said, no, we're not going to do that. And when Pharaoh approached them later saying, why didn't you do what I told you to do? They said, oh, these women, they're strong. Basically, by the time our people get there to help them out, they've already have a baby. So, and then then they hide their kids. They hide their babies. So we're too late. And God actually blessed them with their own family, with their own houses, which is interesting, because if you're thinking about houses and family and tabernacle and how we're a temple of God and all this kind of stuff, you start to see this play out. And Moses is writing this type of language. that he blessed these midwives and gave them their own house. If you think that's just about a physical building, I would say you're wrong. It can be, but it's also the idea that he actually blessed them for protecting the Hebrew women that were actually having children by not obeying the king of Egypt. And the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said unto them, Why have ye done this thing, and have saved the men children alive? So here's where we kind of get the first kind of hints of man child. Men children. This is plural, meaning any Hebrew child. Why did you save them alive? So this is why God blessed them, because they saved these Hebrew children. Midwife said, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively, and they are delivered ere the midwives come in unto them. So before the midwives get there, because I think some people go, there's no way these two women were able to go all over the place. And it's like, we're talking about leadership here. We're talking about leadership. These two women were in charge of all the other midwives, because that's why they said when we get here, they've already had their baby. Therefore God dwelt with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, he made them houses. It's cool. Yeah, I've heard that too. I heard you can be arrested for preaching out of Leviticus. I heard that. So we'll see. Then this is where Pharaoh comes up with another idea. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, Every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. It's interesting that China went the other way. They're basically, any family that had a daughter is basically cast them out. And now they're running into issues. I don't know what the ratio is, but there's a lot of men compared to women there. Not good for the women, but for the men, there's so many men compared to women because of these rules that were passed over the last 30, 40, 50 years. That if you have a woman, if you have a girl, a daughter, you should either get rid of that daughter or give her up for adoption. It's crazy, right? And there went a man out of the house of Levi, and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him for 3 months. That's kind of interesting. She hid him for 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, probably because he was crying and all kinds of stuff, like after 3 months, it's a little tough to hide these little toddlers. She took for him an ark of bulrushes, and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein, and she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. And his sister stood afar off, to wit. Whenever you see the word to wit, this is for the purpose of, or for specifically this reason. So his sister stood afar off, to wit, what would be done to him. She wanted to see what was going to happen to her little brother, Moses. It's interesting that Moses' mother put him in an ark. There's some kind of symbology there. I wonder what that could be. Symbolism, eh? I just find it interesting that the Savior of the nation of Israel is put into an ark, and he is thus saved, and putting him into the water, into the river. Daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." And then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee?" And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, "Go." And the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, "Take this child away, nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages." And the women took the child and nursed it, and the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses, and she said, "Because I drew him out of the water." So that's what Moses' name means, drawn out of water. It's also interesting that she knew that this was a Hebrew baby, because why else would anyone put a Hebrew baby in the Nile or in an ark unless they were under duress and they're like, at least maybe my child has a chance. Probably not the first child that they've actually seen in a river, if I'm being honest, because that was kind of the tradition, was if a male child was born, to cast it into the river. Horrible. Absolutely horrible. Another interesting thing is the word Hebrew also means crossed over. It's kind of like a nickname. So Abraham was known as a person that crossed over. So he came from the area of, I think from the area of Chaldees, Babylon, Iraq, all that area, and basically came over from Syria, crossed over into Canaan. Hebrew means crossed over. So the word cross is actually built into the fabric of the Israelite nation, the Israelites. It's built into their DNA, if you will, that they are crossed over ones. I find that fascinating. Even when you see how the tribes are actually spread out when they camp, and you've probably seen videos of this, that they basically look like a cross. You can't help it. You have 3 tribes in the north, 3 in the east, 3 in the south, 3 in the west, and then the Levites are kind of hanging around in various camps. And then Moses and Aaron and his family are on the west or on the east side, which is interesting to me. I find that fascinating, that it's shaped like a cross. These are crossed over people that have actually crossed over the Red Sea, passed through the Red Sea, and they never had a drop of water on them. They went through the sea dry. This is what we call a baptism unto the baptism of Moses. I think that's in 1 Corinthians 10, where Paul talks about this, that they were baptized into Moses. So if you think they were dunked in water, you'd be incorrect. That's not what baptism means. They were baptized into his leadership. His leadership actually drew them out of Egypt from one realm into another realm. They were on their way to the promised land. And I believe within 2 weeks, if they had listened to Joshua and Caleb, they would have been into the promised land. They would have entered into his rest. But they didn't. Instead, they listened to the 10 spies that said, "No, these giants are going to eat our children." And God said, "Because you said that, I'm actually going to reverse this curse that you said, and I'm going to allow your children, anyone under the age of 20, into the promised land, and anybody that was over the age of 20, which I believe is the age of accountability, they were not permitted to go into the promised land." And the last person to die was Moses. Then Joshua was allowed to lead people into the promised land, the next generation, after he had them all circumcised. So there's lots going on here, but if you think about Israel, they are basically crossed over people, Passover people, because God instituted the first Passover in Egypt to get them ready to have unleavened bread, to basically put everything on them right away, jewelry, gold, whatever, like don't look back, just leave quickly. That's all built in. And when you think about Jesus telling his disciples when he's going to come back, when he's going to return, what are the signs that the temple is going to get destroyed, and what are the signs going to look like, and when is the world going to end? They asked Jesus that. And Jesus told them, he says, look, when you see all these things begin to happen, labor pains, birth pains, the idea that there are going to be wars and rumors of wars. Right now, arguably, there's between 120 and 150 wars going on right now across the planet. Excursions, people going against governments, all kinds of stuff. This is not just Iran versus Israel in the United States. It's not just Ukraine versus China. There are over 120 documented in the last year of wars going on, mini wars, little wars. And for the first time in history that written history that we know of, this is like the number of wars that are actually going on around us right now have never been like that. We've never had that many wars going on. All these mini pockets of wars all over the place. It's crazy. It's crazy. So you can't help but think when Jesus said, but that's still not the end. This is just the beginning of the end. So we're basically at the latter stages, I believe, of grace, and I feel like we actually entered into overtime. Where what is overtime? Well, it's where God is tarrying. Why do we say tarrying? It's because we don't know when he's going to come, but it feels like it's very soon. So when we talk about the parable of the 10 virgins, we hear a cry go out that the bridegroom is coming. But he tarried. And in that time frame of tarrying, 5 virgins said, share with us your oil. And the other 5 said, if we share with you our oil that we have, we won't have enough. Go buy yourself some oil. So in that time frame, which I believe we are in that time frame of tarrying, the Lord is tarrying right now. So we don't know if he's waiting for the perfect time, which I think that makes the most sense. We just don't understand when that time is. But I believe that's where we're at. I believe we're actually on borrowed time. I believe we're in overtime. We're in the time of the Lord is tarrying, and there could be a cry, and maybe the cry has already been sounded. And now the next thing that we're waiting for is the bridegroom who calls us, his bride, his church, his body, up to him, where we can be with the Lord forever. I don't think I'm stretching things. Because this is what I feel. You can argue with me and say, your feelings don't count, Shane. Everything is actually perfectly normal right now. I would surmise to you that it is not normal times, that we've not had this kind of a feeling 2 years, 3 years, 4 years ago. I didn't even talk about what they're trying to do with AI and all kinds of crazy stuff. Maybe I'll do that in another video. There's a company called AI Image, which is interesting because when you go into the book of Revelation, the false prophet makes everyone worship an image that comes to life. And anyone that doesn't worship that image doesn't worship the devil, doesn't worship the Antichrist that has a mortal wound. If you don't worship any one of those, you will be executed. So it's interesting that we have Optimus, we have Tesla, we have Elon, who basically says, like, there's nothing more important in the world right now than Optimus. And that's his C-3PO type machine that he's working on right now. I think you can buy one for between $30,000 and $100,000 US. And they're planning on making more of these things. And I believe they're going to replace your phone one day, where you don't need your phone. You just speak to Optimus somewhere in the corner, just lying dormant, or maybe it's getting you another cup of coffee because yours is cold. And you're like, oh, can you remind me to call my mother? I haven't called my mother for a couple of days. Can you remind me? Can you put that in my calendar? And it'll say, absolutely no problem. Anything else? Oh, yeah, I got to get groceries today. When is garbage day? It's next Tuesday. Okay, thank you for that. It's right out of the movie I, Robot. And eventually, because of that hive mentality that we talked about the other night, the idea is if you have the queen bee, the rest of the hive is all in tune. So imagine all these robots that are in our home, and maybe the government places them into our homes and says, hey, you need one of these. You don't need a phone. You don't need internet. You don't need Wi-Fi. You don't need the Wi-Fi password or anything. This Optimus robot has everything built into it. It can connect to your TV so that when you're watching TV, it has all the wireless stuff that you need. You don't need to worry about anything. If you need to do a conference call, it can route you in, whatever. And then if you needed to cut your grass, whatever else, I could see that happening sooner than later. And I talked about that in Tennessee last year when I did my presentation. I might need to update it because before it was just an image of a humanoid that I thought was going to be presented, where you actually go to terminals and enter your iris, and then all of a sudden you've entered into the world coin. Like, basically they have their own currency. I was not thinking of every person having their own android. I was not thinking about that, but we've been programmed since 1977 when Star Wars came out to get used to the idea of R2-D2 being your best friend or C-3PO being your best companion. Even Luke Skywalker, who used the Force quite a bit, is also quite friendly with C-3PO and R2-D2. And they even have a beast that is humanoid, which is Chewbacca, and a lot of us like Chewbacca. I liked Chewbacca when I was a kid. And then, so you have an introduction to the Force. And according to George Lucas, the Force is all around us. It's in us, and it's in all this kind of stuff. But when you think about the book of Daniel, talking about the son of perdition, not worshiping the gods that his fathers knew, but worship the god of forces. That's kind of interesting. I used to think of that as just a military term, which I'm not opposed to, because if you think about it, like in for example, in the United States of America, they have 3 branches. They have 3 branches of government, kind of thing. So I find that, and one of them obviously is the military. God of forces, that basically the Antichrist will worship a God that his fathers didn't know, and he's going to have his eye on the promised land. So whoever that Antichrist is, he's going to be spending a lot of money on upgrading stealth bombers. This is right out of the Terminator, by the way. This is Terminator 2 stuff, where Sarah Connor is asking, how does this happen? How is this going to happen? And the Terminator says on August 16th or whatever, or 15th, whatever, at 3 p.m., Cyberdyne is upgrading all the stealth bombers, and basically Cyberdyne systems become self-aware, and they try to stop it, and it realizes that the humans are trying to stop it. So then what they do is they try and send a missile to Russia. And John Connor says, but why would they do that? Aren't the Russians our friends? It's interesting, right? And the Terminator basically says, exactly. It's because when a rocket gets sent to Russia, Russia will think that the U.S. is at war with it. So then in turn, Russia will send a rocket to the U.S., and then you got total oblivion. And then that's where the machines actually take over and start targeting humans after World War III. It's funny. Even when you think about how James Cameron came up, and it's interesting that his name is James. That's the Greek name for Jacob. But James Cameron, arguably the father of science fiction, probably one of the greatest science fiction writers, one of the greatest science fiction movie producers, if you will, directors, came up with the idea of the concept of the Terminator when he got fired from his job as an independent in Rome, and he woke up one day with a fever of like 120 and saw a city on fire and a metal man coming out of the fire. That was his vision that he had for the movie Terminator. Then he decided later, I'm going to draw, because he was an artist and an engineer. He thought, what would this world look like that had a creature come out of a fire that has metal skin mixed with skin? It's interesting because that is eerily similar to Daniel's vision of iron mixed with clay. So we're talking about machines, robots, AI, all this stuff. James Cameron's talking about this stuff in the 80s, that a man-like Terminator is going to destroy a future leader by attacking his mom. When you think about the book of Revelation, you see the devil, the serpent, that ancient serpent, waiting to attack the woman when she has a man-child. And as soon as that man-child is delivered, it goes straight up to God's throne. And instead, the Antichrist, or the serpent, the devil, actually goes after her children. And they flee into the desert, into the wilderness. And at the end of Terminator 1, Sarah Connor actually flees into a wilderness, into Mexico or New Mexico or somewhere, where there's bunkers and all kinds of stuff. It's all over the place. And that was programmed into us like 26 years ago. And they just keep hammering us with end time stuff about a man-made machine that takes over the whole world. It's everywhere. So where are we? We are on chapter 1 of Exodus. Man, I'm sorry, guys. I thought I would be able to get through this whole book. All right, so Moses' early life. He goes out one day. He sees he sees an Egyptian and he sees a Hebrew. And the Egyptian is pistol whipping the Hebrew. So he looks at this away and he looks at that away and then basically chokes out, kills the Egyptian and buries him into the sand. Very similar to what Cain did to Abel. We don't know much about what happened to Abel other than the ground cried out because of the blood of Abel, the precious blood of Abel. But it's interesting that Moses killed an Egyptian, and we'll call this guy Fred. He thought maybe Fred would appreciate what he did. So the next day, he comes up to Fred arguing with Tom, and he comes up to them and he's like, "Hey guys, you shouldn't be fighting with each other." And Fred says to him, "What? Are you going to kill me like you did that Egyptian the other day?" And that's when Moses went, "Oh man, these guys, I'm sure everyone knows about this now. If this guy's telling it to this guy's telling it to this guy, I'm sure my life is but over." And sure enough, Pharaoh was wanting to kill him. So Moses had to flee into the wilderness, and he comes across Midianites. It's the easiest way to say it, which are I think they're the descendants of Ishmael, I believe. I might have that wrong. I think they're from the Ishmaelites, but I'm not sure. I have to fact check that, because there's a couple of versions of the Midianites. One, it looks like they're from the Ishmaelites because remember when Joseph was sold to the Midianites. But I think there's another faction of the Midianites. I could be wrong. Because if that's the case, if Moses married an Ishmaelite woman, that's kind of interesting to me. It's kind of interesting to me. So maybe my fact checkers will fact check me and say who the Midianites are. Maybe you can kind of give me a reference on that. But I think they're the Ishmaelites. Why don't I just read it? All right, so Moses flees from Pharaoh. Shepherds came and drove away these Midian women. There's 7 daughters of the priest of Midian. Shepherds came, drove them away. Moses stood up and helped them. Their 7 daughters watered their flock, and when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, "How is it that you come so soon today?" And they're like, "Well, this Egyptian helped us out." They're like, "What? You left this guy? He just helped you? Bring him here." So it's interesting that they thought he was an Egyptian. He probably looked like an Egyptian, probably spoke Egypt very well. Don't let that idea that Moses said that his tongue was a little bit tied up. I think that's in relationship to the Hebrew language. I don't think that's Egyptian, because remember, he was raised as an Egyptian, and God said that, "You know what? I will use your brother because he speaks well." What does he speak well? Well, most likely he spoke Hebrew eloquently enough that their fellow brothers would understand what Aaron is saying. Because imagine Moses speaking to the Israelites in broken Hebrew, because he mostly understands and speaks and writes Egyptian. They might not take that so well. But if you have Aaron speaking on behalf of Moses, it kind of makes more sense that they're going to buy into what God is wanting to do, which is cause Israel to exit stage right. Maybe that's where that saying came from. When Adam and Eve got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, God's like, "You're going to exit stage right." He got kicked out. I don't know. Maybe not, but that just came to my head. This is why you guys come to this channel, for golden nuggets. Always wondered, exit stage right. I think that comes from Shakespeare back in the day when a writer couldn't finish the play that they wrote, like they couldn't figure out an ending. What they would do is they would have someone that pretends that they are a god, and they would come in and remove the hero and get them out of a pickle, and they would remove them to the right off the stage, like exiting stage right, because they didn't know how to finish the play. And then the curtain would come down and they'd all bow, and everybody would be like, wow, wasn't that an amazing play? It was so awesome, where the hero was battling all these people and all these creatures and everything. And at the last minute, a god came in and grabbed that person and moved them to the right and got them out of that scene. And then the credits roll. That's basically how they ended every movie. And today, or ended every play. And today, when we see things like that, we're like, oh, this is so dumb. At the end of the show, we have the movie's just chugging along. And then all of a sudden at the end, it's because an alien comes in and saves the day. I think of the Crystal Skull, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Everything was moving along right up until the end when this huge alien spacecraft came out of the earth, and it's like that's how the movie ended. So they do that all the time in movies, where at the end it'll be like an alien coming in at the last second to save humanity. It's so weird. Our humanity figures out something at the end, and then the credits roll. It's always centered around a god, little g, but that goes all the way back to like the 15th century. They just didn't know how to finish it, so they would have a person actually walk onto the stage and remove the hero. Now you know why I'm a bit of a storyteller. That's my nickname, Free Willy. From the Catholic debate that I had, he's like, oh, here comes Shane, the storyteller. Well, you're not wrong. You're not wrong there, Willie. You're not wrong. I like telling stories. All right, so King of Egypt dies. God says to Moses, you should go back. It's like, oh, man. And remember, this is like 40 years later. So Moses was about 40 the first time when he left Egypt, and then hung around for 40 years in the wilderness. And then God tells him to go back and free his people. And God gets into a bit of an argument, I guess, in some ways, saying, like, can't you pick someone else? Like, who am I? I can't speak, all this kind of stuff. But God keeps pressing in. And he says, look, take your staff. What do you have in your hand? I just have a rod. Okay, we're going to use this. You're going to throw it down. It's going to turn to a snake. You're going to cause water to turn to blood. You're going to put your hand in and you're going to pull it out, and it's going to look like leprous. And they're going to believe you because of all these signs. But I'm also going to harden his heart as well. So the Israelites will believe you, but Pharaoh won't. But I'm going to do this because I'm going to show everyone my glory because of all the plagues and everything that's going to happen. And I'm telling you ahead of time what's going to happen. And then Pharaoh's going to let you go. I think it's interesting that we see Moses is keeping the flock of Jethro. So I'm just backing up. This is chapter 3. Keeping the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of the Midian, and he led his flock to the back side of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. I find this interesting because the same thing happened on Mount Sinai when God showed up and he was asking the people to come close to him. And then when Moses went up into the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights to hammer out the 10 commandments, where basically the finger of God actually wrote out the 10 commandments, and God was teaching Moses everything that he was to teach the Israelites. When they saw the mountain, it looked like it was literally on fire, that it was consuming itself. And they're like, goodness gracious, great balls of fire. Maybe that's where that came from, that saying. They're like, Moses is gone. We don't know what happened to him. So Aaron, we kind of need you to create some gods for us so that we can go back to Egypt. Crazy, right? So while God is working on the 10 commandments, commenced by angels to Moses, and Moses is going to be bringing it down, they're worshiping a golden calf butt naked, to their shame. That's a little bit later. We're too early yet. We're only in chapter 3. But I find it interesting that the Lord shows up as a flame of fire. And what was curious to Moses is this tree didn't burn up. That made him curious. So he went over to it to see why the bush is not burnt. Because again, if you think about it from the perspective of a shepherd, you're going to be thinking about animals and fires and all kinds of stuff, because you got to make sure that your sheep are taken care of. So as a good shepherd, he's like, is this a real fire? Like, why is it not spreading? Because if it spreads, I got to put this thing out, or I got to leave with the sheep and go somewhere else. So he's going to investigate why this bush is not burning. And then Moses, God calls him Moses, and he said, here I am. So we talked about Moses calling, and God promises, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt onto the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Notice the Gershonites are missing, the 7th one, because there were 7 nations that they're supposed to destroy, but only 6 are mentioned here. I think it's because Joshua made a deal with the Gershonites. These were basically, as far as I'm concerned, the first or second set of group actors, where they're actually pretending by putting clothes on them, very similar to what Jacob did, pretending that he was Esau. But these actors show up and they're like, hey, look at the bread. Look at how crumbly it is. Doesn't that mean that we've journeyed from a far distance? Look at our clothes, how tattered. Look at our shoes. They're no good. Doesn't that alone show you that we've traveled from a far distance? And Joshua bought it. He didn't even consult any of the other leadership. He's like, okay, we swear unto you, we will not destroy you. We will not battle you. And then later, through their various sources, they found out that these guys were actually their neighbors. And then they approached Joshua and they said, why did you make a pact with these people? And Joshua's like, it doesn't matter. What matters is our word. We said that we're not going to destroy them. And it's interesting that they're not listed here as the 7. They were in Abraham's day, because God said the sin of the Amorites aren't at the ceiling yet. And I believe they were listed like seven nations that Israel was to destroy. But because of that treaty, one of them was basically sentenced to be tributarians, which means not Trinitarians, tributarians, which means that they were just they were responsible for carrying the firewood and water and all that kind of stuff for their terms of conditions. All right, so Moses feels inadequate. Aaron shows up, and Moses took his wife and his 2 sons, because he has 2 sons by now, and heads back to Egypt. But what's interesting, this one is a difficult one for me, I must admit. Moses took his wife and his sons and set them upon the ass, and he returned to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the rod of God in his hand. And the Lord said unto Moses, when thou goest, return into Egypt, that thou doest all those wonders before Pharaoh, which I have put in thine hand. But I will harden his heart, that he shall not let the people go. And thou shalt say unto Pharaoh, thus saith the Lord, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. Says, let my son go. So they do all this, but later, where is it? Where did it go? Oh, yeah. I will slay thy son, even thy firstborn. And it came to pass by the way in the inn that the Lord met him and sought to kill him. That's always been kind of an enigma for me. Then Zipporah took a sharp stone and cut off the foreskin of her son and cast it at his feet and said, surely a bloody husband thou art to me. So he let him go, and then she said, a bloody husband thou art because of the circumcision. So it kind of feels like, and this is just me spitballing here, it kind of felt like it was because Moses didn't circumcise his two sons. That's what it feels like. And I've always wondered why he didn't do that. It's a pretty big deal. But what I find interesting is the ones that were not circumcised actually ended up going into the promised land. So I wonder if Moses was thinking about leaving them uncircumcised. I'm just spitballing here, because for 40 years, no one was circumcised. And the ones that came out of Egypt, actually didn't make it into the promised land. Why? Because of unbelief. So basically, anyone that was circumcised over the age of 20 didn't go into the promised land, which I find interesting. That's just my thoughts. My thoughts around. There's something going on with that. And again, you can't help but see that. Joshua actually ended up with his men circumcising all the young men, because it actually says in the book of Joshua that they were not circumcised after they came out of the wilderness, or after they came out of Egypt. Like none of this next generation were circumcised. It's kind of an interesting thought. So God renews his covenant, confronts Pharaoh, and I might have to make this into a part 2, because we're at chapter 5. So Moses and Aaron go in, and they told Pharaoh, thus saith the Lord God of Israel, let my people go, so that they may hold a feast with me unto the wilderness. And Pharaoh said, who is the Lord that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I know not the Lord, neither will I let Israel go. So that's his confession. I don't know of this God that you're talking about. I don't answer to him. You answer to me. In fact, everybody answers to me. They said, the God of the Hebrews has met with us, and let us go, we pray thee, 3 days' journey to the desert. So they get into a bit of an argument. So every time Moses issues a plague, Pharaoh says, go away. And then he changes his mind, and then he says, okay, pray for me and take this plague away. And then he says, you can go, but your children have to stay. And then he says, okay, now finally, after Pharaoh lost his firstborn, he sends them away saying, all of you can go. And by the end of these 10 plagues, the Israelites had so much favor, and I think it might be an unhealthy favor, as in people feared that their lives were next, that God allowed them to give them all their jewelry, all their gold and everything, so that they can actually leave Egypt. almost like instant millionaires overnight. They basically ransacked Egypt. So Moses goes in. There's murmuring against Moses because remember when Moses and Aaron went there the first time, Pharaoh said it's because these people are lazy that they want to leave. They're idle. So because they're idle, I'm going to make their work even harder. Instead of us providing straw for them, they're going to have to go out and find straw, and they're going to have to keep their quota as the day before. So then the officers get mad at Pharaoh and they say, your people are not bringing us straw anymore. Instead, they're making us go out and go and get straw, and you're keeping the quota, so it's the fault of your people. And Pharaoh's like, no, you guys are lazy. And then when they were leaving, they saw Moses and Aaron coming in. Like, it's because of you that our lives are miserable. And then Moses says to God, like, ever since you had me do this stuff, they don't like me anymore. So it's interesting because they're basically the leadership is actually getting chastised because of Pharaoh's rulings. So they're getting whipped. And then because the people aren't able to meet the quota. So because the Israelites weren't meeting the quota, the officers over them, the Hebrew officers, were getting whipped, and they would go back to Pharaoh and they're saying, like, it's the fault of your people. Like, your taskmasters over us, they're giving us ridiculous quotas, which is interesting that they're actually able to confront Pharaoh and argue. Tells you how tippity top they were, that they at least had Pharaoh's ears, even though he called them lazy. But the fact that they were able to argue their case is interesting to me. So they murmured against Moses as well, and they said basically, let God be your judge, which is interesting. Because that was the whole thing. They're like, are you going to judge us? Remember Fred, the guy that killed an Egyptian, or that was fighting with an Egyptian, and Moses killed the Egyptian? And remember the words that they echoed, are you going to be our judge too? Like you judged the Egyptian the other day? And now they're saying to God, may the Lord look upon you and judge, because you have made our savor to be abhorred in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servants, to put a sword in their hand to slay us. So this is the leadership. They are ticked at Moses and Aaron. And Moses basically says to the Lord, wherefore hast thou so evil entreated this people? Why is it that thou hast sent me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in thy name, he hath done evil to this people, neither hast thou delivered thy people at all. You haven't done anything. If anything, you made their lives worse, and now I'm getting ridiculed. And I think some of us feel that, at least I do. I should say me. Sometimes I feel like that when you're doing the right thing, that sometimes it feels like life gets worse. But don't grow weary of doing good. Don't grow weary of that. Hopefully that's my encouragement to you. Even though it might look like your world around you is crapola, like Moses, he was doing everything that God had told him, but yet his very own family was basically coming against him. So the people were not listening to Moses anymore because they were in bondage. They're getting whipped and beaten because of the words that Moses spoke to Pharaoh. So basically, Moses says, okay, this is where we're going to start doing some plagues. We're going to start levying up here. So he instructs Pharaoh, basically says, let my people go. And if not, these plagues are coming. So then we get the showdown with the rod of the serpents. It's interesting that the magicians can do the exact same thing as Moses. So Moses threw down his rod, the Egyptians threw down their rods. The difference is Moses' rod ate their rods. Nobody seems to say anything. That was pretty spectacular. We will see a little bit later that the magicians can only do so many things. And then eventually it gets to the point where they're like, they can't even stand before Pharaoh because there are some plagues that they cannot mimic. So that tells you that in the future, during the reign of the Antichrist, he's going to be performing miracles that, if it were possible, even the elect will be deceived, if it were possible. That goes all the way back to Egypt when Pharaoh's prophets, false prophets, priests, were trying to perform the same miracle or the same plagues that Moses did. So frogs came everywhere. Pharaoh asked for relief. Lice come everywhere. Magicians did the same thing. They're able to create lice. Plague of flies. Except for the land of Goshen, which is always interesting to me, where the Israelites lived, they weren't getting attacked by these plagues because God was showing a division between his people and the Egyptians. And the whole land was corrupted by the reason of the swarm of flies. And Pharaoh said, go, you can go sacrifice, take your animals and just go down the street and sacrifice your animals. And Moses is like, no, like if we, because we're Israelites, if we start sacrificing these animals, won't the Egyptians stone us? So this is the first kind of an idea of capital punishment because of some of the rules and regulations that the Egyptians have. So that seems like it's kind of carried over into the wilderness where stoning was kind of a thing. It was kind of like a capital offense where, I should say, a capital punishment, where if you did something wrong, you got stoned. So Moses was aware of this. He's like, if we sacrifice our animals here in Egypt, won't they stone us? So he said, we need to go on a 3 days journey. We're not going to tell you which animals because we don't know until we get there. So we need everybody. We need our kids and everything. And this is different than when Joseph left to go and bury Jacob. A lot of the Egyptians went, like the tippity top of the Egyptians went with Joseph to go bury his father in the land of Canaan, in the land of Shechem specifically. But he left his family at home. So I don't think Pharaoh was even concerned one bit. And it even got so big that the Canaanites were like, wow, whoever it was that died was a big deal to these Egyptians. Look at the funeral procession. They categorized it as Egyptian. I don't know how many times I could say that's fascinating or that's interesting, but that is interesting to me. So Moses went out, entreats the Lord. Every time there's a plague of the cattle. A very grievous murrain. It's almost like tumors, cancers, sores, or whatever, like very painful for the animals. So these animals had all these, you could almost think of it like not foot and mouth. What was that disease that the cattle had? I forget what it's called, but it was very bad. It's mad cow disease. So this would be very similar to that there's a disease going upon the horses, the asses, the camels, the oxen, and upon the sheep. There shall be a very grievous murrain, almost like mad cow disease. You're a little bit late. You're not too bad. We're only in chapter 9 of Exodus. I'm trying to get through the entire 40 chapters of Exodus in less than 2 hours, and I'm running out of time. And the Lord shall sever between the cattle of Israel and the cattle of Egypt. So basically, Egypt is getting destroyed, and Pharaoh can't see it because he's so angry with Moses and with the Israelites. He's so angry, and it gets to a point where his own people are like, can't you see what's happening around us? Our country is being destroyed by your stubbornness. Boy, that's kind of echoes a little bit of today. Kind of feels like in the United States a little bit, where it feels like your governments are doing things that feels like it's actually destroying your nation from the inside out. I know, because our government does the same thing. Like, it's like we can't be destroyed from without. So it's like we got to destroy ourselves from within. And it's weird. And I feel like that's kind of what your Presidente Trumpy is doing. It feels like it. Now, there might be peace. Kind of sounds like there's peace talks, that for the next 2 weeks, there's nothing going on with Iran. They're not going to be bombed anymore. I might have to make a video about that. But do you guys believe that there's going to be peace now? Maybe this is that echoing of, because there's so many wars going on, that eventually we get to a point where people cry out and say peace and safety. Like, it feels like we're starting to get there, because I believe once the whole world is kind of on board, we're either gone just before that or we're gone right when they do that. It feels very close. That's why I say it feels like we're living in overtime. We're living in the time that God is actually tarrying. It's like borrowed time is what it feels like, if I'm being honest. If I'm not being honest, that's such a weird saying. If I'm being honest, it feels like the Lord is coming. But if I'm not being honest, then it feels like he's not coming. That just seems like a weird saying. Because when you say that, if I'm being honest, it sounds weird to say. So I don't like saying that, if I'm being honest. If I'm being real, how about that? If I'm being real with you guys, it feels like this feels a little bit different than last year. It feels like there's so many things going on right now around the planet. And in Canada, we're feeling it. The States, you guys, like, I've never seen this ice stuff like it is. Like, who goes around wearing masks and taking people out? It feels like I used to live in Minnesota. We lived in Bloomington, Minnesota, lived there for a year, and it was a beautiful city. It was beautiful. I loved it. Went to see a Blue Jay game, lived there for a year, lived in America. It was very different than it is now. Like, not all the states are like that, but Minnesota kind of has a soft spot in my heart. And when I hear things like ICE doing crazy stuff, when I hear riots, like, I think this is where what's his name, Floyd, got killed by a police officer, Gavin or whatever his name is. Just horrendous stuff. Like, just horrendous. I think this is where you guys had the fraudulent voting, mysterious, where Minnesota all of a sudden late at night had all these crates showed up, and all of a sudden the votes came in mysteriously for Biden. Dead people were voting. Minnesota is just, I don't know. It's a beautiful state, but it's weird. So we got plagues on the cattle, not on the Israelite cattle. Then Moses warns of the hail, because already there's been so many things that have been decimating that you're getting kind of to the final stages where now hail is showing up as well. And it's kind of out of season. So Moses stretches forth his hand, and there's hail and fire. Like, this is not a normal hailstorm. This is hail mixed with fire. Very grievous, such as there was none like it in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. which is interesting because Moses didn't say it won't happen again. Because usually when you're talking about Jacob's trouble, the 7-year tribulation, usually it's framed like there will not be a time like it before. There was never a time like it before, including the flood, before the flood, and there will never be a time after like this period. But here it says, since Egypt became a nation, there was never anything like this. And then it stops. That to me means it could happen again and be even worse than what we see here. All the hail smote throughout all the land that was in the field, both man and beast, and the hail smote every herb of the field and break every tree of the field. Only in the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel were, was there no hail. So again, Moses says, yeah, you guys are free to go. And God's like, I kind of feel like you're playing the game with us. And so everything got destroyed except for the flax and barley, because the flax was in the ear and the flax was bald, which means it's not ready yet to come out. It's not harvest time yet. So it was too early for it to even be destroyed. But that's okay, because there's another plague coming, which is the plague of locusts. And the locusts actually absolutely 100% clean up everything. They enter into the houses. They clean up everything in the field, everything that was not destroyed by the hail or any other plague. These locusts perform Operation Clean Sweep. They go after everything. And these locusts, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. It went over the whole land of Egypt, rested in all the coasts of Egypt. Very grievous were they. Before them were no such locusts as they, neither after them shall be shut. So that's interesting. There's not going to be this many locusts in the future. For they covered the face, at least in Egypt. For they covered the face of the whole earth, so that the land was darkened, and they did eat every herb of the land and all the fruit trees which the hail had left. And there remained not any green thing in the trees, or in the herb of the field, or through all the land of Egypt. This is decimation. Pharaoh called for Aaron and Moses in haste, and he said, I have sinned against the Lord, against you. Now pray for me. He went out from Pharaoh, entreated the Lord, and the Lord turned a mighty wind, west wind, and took away all the locusts and cast them into the Red Sea. There remained not one locust in all the coasts, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, so he would not let the children go. Then we get the plague of darkness. People have been talking about this. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out thine hand towards heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, even darkness which may be felt. How about having darkness like that where you can actually feel it? And Moses stretched forth his hand toward heaven, and there was a thick darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. And they saw not one another, neither rose any from his place for 3 days. But all the children had light in their dwellings. All the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. And I find this interesting because here's me going all Black Swanning. I think there is a future time coming where the sun will lose its light and the moon will turn to blood and 1/3 of the stars will disappear. In fact, I think all the stars will disappear eventually. That could mean a nuclear disaster where all the clouds are so thick that you can't see the sun and the moon looks like blood. It's possible, because I don't think the sun would go out, but it says in the Bible, it says the sun will be darkened and the moon will be turned to blood. So you kind of have to look at it from that perspective. But this here, you can't get away from the idea that the darkness was so thick that it could be felt and nobody could leave. And I think as you go through the tribulation, I think it gets worse. I think deception gets worse. I think the stars begin to fall. I believe the sun gets darker and darker each day. I believe time gets sped up. We lose a third of the day. We lose a third of the night. There's a lot of supernatural stuff, God ordained stuff, I should say, that is happening where the elements are now changing. You may wake up one day and go, I don't know what day it is because the stars aren't lining up anymore. The moon might be in a different position, or the sun or something. You're like, this is just unpredictable, because we know, according to Matthew 24, where Jesus talks about sign. I think it's in Matthew, maybe it's in Luke. It's one of the three. It's Mark, Luke, or John, where basically men's hearts will fail because they can't figure out what's going on. Paraphrasing. It's like they have heart attacks because they're trying to figure out the signs and all this kind of stuff, what's going on with the moon, the sun, the earth, and they're just dropping like flies. They're so stressed out they can't sleep. And then Pharaoh says, after the locusts, he basically says, go away from me. You're not going to see my face anymore. Says he would not let the people go. And he says, Pharaoh said, get thee away from me. Take heed to thyself that you see my face no more. For in the day that thou seest my face, thou shalt die. So if you see me again, you're as good as dead. I will kill you. Moses said, thou hast spoken well. I will see thy face again no more. Very sad. Very sad. So God says, I'm going to bring one more plague, and this is where he asks the Israelites to go out and gather jewels. So go to your neighbors, ask them for stuff, and they're going to give you everything. So they went out, asked the Egyptians for silver, for jewels of gold, and they gave them whatever they wanted. And then Moses warns of the firstborn death. Says, but any of the children of the Israelites will not be harmed. It'd be anyone that is not Israelite. And then you guys are going to bow down to God and basically say, get thee out of here. Go, be gone. Because they would, at that time, after every firstborn son gets killed in Egypt, they're like, please leave us alone. Leave our land. So Aaron and Moses and Aaron did all these things, and Pharaoh hardened his heart so that he would not let the children go. So this is where we get the first Passover instituted. And the Lord, and I might end this with the Passover, it might be appropriate, and then we'll just make this into a part 2. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months, and it shall be the first month of the year unto you. Speak ye unto all the congregation of Egypt, saying, in the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for the house. Make it a lamb without blemish, a male of the first year. Ye shall take it from the sheep or from the goats. Ye shall keep it unto the 14th day of the same month. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. They shall take of the blood and strike it on the 2 side posts, on the upper door posts of the houses, wherein they shall eat it. And ye shall let nothing, I'm just kind of skimming through here. And ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning. That which remaineth in the morning ye shall burn with fire. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses. Shall back up. I will pass through the land of Egypt this night. That's why we call it a Passover. And will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where you are. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. And this shall be kept unto you a memorial, and ye shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations, and ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. It goes on and on. So basically, this is the first Passover. They put blood on the lintel and on the posts, and basically they killed the Passover. And the Lord says again that I will pass through. The Lord will pass through and smite the Egyptians, and when he seeth the blood on the lintel and on the two side posts, the Lord will pass over the door and not suffer the destroyer to come in unto your houses to smite you. And in Psalms, it talks about destroying evil angels that actually came throughout Egypt. So again, if you think angels are your friends, they may not be your friends. Not all of them. Their job is to not be your friend, but their job is to do the Lord's bidding. And in this case, they destroyed many, if not all, of the firstborn of the children of Egypt. All right, so then death of the firstborn happens, so that Moses rose up in the night, he and all his servants, all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. So then the Egyptians suddenly became urgent, and they're like, get out of here. So the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth. So they basically spoiled the Egyptians and fled and left. So there was about 600,000 on foot that were men beside the children. A mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds, and even very much cattle. So it's interesting that Moses wrote that there was a mixed multitude went with them. That tells me that there were many Egyptians that were like, look, there's nothing left in this town. Let's get out of Dodge. Maybe that's where that saying came from. Let's get out of Dodge. But we know many Egyptians went with the Israelites into the wilderness. And after a while, these people were complaining, I think influencing the Israelites, saying, we had it better in Egypt. It wasn't that bad. We actually had it pretty good there, considering all the whippings and all that kind of stuff. But we actually didn't have it too bad. And there was lentil soup and all this kind of crazy stuff. We had it pretty good there. So many of these people murmured, and a lot of them died in the wilderness. In fact, all of them died at first generation because of unbelief. They never believed that God could take them into the promised land. That's why they died in the wilderness. And they tried to take out Moses on a few occasions. They tried to go back. They tried to build leadership to take them back to Egypt. But the crazy thing is, because God would lead them by fire at night and by smoke during the day, I think it would be difficult for them to find their way back, because God took them on a route that they had never been before. So good luck leaving God's presence and going back to Egypt, even if you wanted to go back. Good luck. You have to deal with the beasts and all kinds of stuff. And what's interesting is later, when Moses institutes 3 festivals for the year, he said basically to the Israelites, don't worry about being attacked during the festivals, because I'm going to put the fear and dread in people. Basically, I'm going to put the fear into people so that they don't attack you when you're sending your men to the place that I'm going to show you in the future of where you're supposed to worship, which later becomes Jerusalem. But I will put fear in people. They're not like other nations. They're not going to attack you on your festivals. That's what Moses wrote, saying, here's the 3 festivals that you celebrate. And people aren't going to attack you during those times, because that's unto the Lord. It's interesting. So they're led by a pillar of cloud and fire. God instructs the Israelites to basically stand between the Red Sea, or basically to stand before the Red Sea. And Moses is kind of like, I'm going to ask God what we should do next because we're kind of surrounded. We see the Egyptians coming, and God basically says, why are you crying to me? Just hold your rod out and watch what I can do. And basically, he parted the Red Sea, and the Israelites crossed the Red Sea basically unscathed. Like they're not even wet. Like they walk on dry ground. And Pharaoh's heart was so hardened that him and his officers went, what are we doing? Why did we let these people go? So they chased them down, hunted them down, met them at the Red Sea, and thought they're now cornered. Now we can take them out. And then a pillar of cloud went behind the Israelites and before the Egyptians and blocked them to give the Israelites enough time to get across the Red Sea. And as they were about to finish crossing the Red Sea, then the cloud went up, and Pharaoh's like, now's our chance to attack. And they went into the Red Sea. And as they were about to get close to the Israelites, their wheels started to fall off. And then they realized, uh-oh, God is against us. Turn back, retreat. And then God caused all the walls of water to collapse, and not one Egyptian survived. They are all drowned. And Miriam sings a song, horse and rider tossed into the sea, and all this stuff. And this is where Moses actually has a song. He talks about it, talks about how they sank like lead. And then Miriam sings a song as well. It's kind of interesting that in Revelation it says that, I forget which chapter, but it talks about they sing a song of Moses as well, which is kind of interesting to me. Kind of goes all the way back to Exodus. So then they come across bitter water, and they're like, didn't we have it better in Egypt? Like, now that we're free, we're now going to starve of, we're dehydrated. It's been like 3 days or whatever without water, and now we're not going to have any water. What shall we drink? And they're all crying to the Lord. And Moses tossed a piece of wood into the water and made it sweet. So God reminds them, look, if you follow me, I'm not going to give you any of the plagues that happened in Egypt. You're going to be disease-free. So in the wilderness, they were murmuring. They murmured so many times. They just kept saying, how is God going to feed us? Like, how is this even possible? Look at how many mouths there are. How can we be fed? How can he give us water? How can he give us flesh? Complain. For like 40 years, they complained. And they were tired of manna from heaven. So God tells Moses, he's like, I'm going to give these people manna. And I want you to keep it as a testimony. Put it in a jar and put it in the ark. So again, they got thirsty, and God tells Moses to strike the rock of Horeb, and then water came out. And the Israelites were going to attack Amalek. And so Joshua went to fight them. And Aaron and Hur basically held up Moses' hands while they're fighting Amalek. And this is a symbol of Jesus Christ being crucified on a cross. On one side, you have Hur holding up his arm. And when his arms go down, Joshua started to lose. But when they held it up, they actually put a stone underneath Moses so that he could sit. And then Aaron was holding up his arm as well. So that's symbolic of the cross of Jesus Christ. It's quite interesting. Then after that battle, Moses builds an altar. Jethro shows up. Moses tells him about all the stuff. He brings his wife and his 2 boys. And And then Moses is saying, this is what happened to us. This is how we came out of Egypt. And Jethro's like, that's awesome. Next day, Moses goes to work, sits down. First guy comes up to him and he's like, Moses, I had a problem the other day. I was going to the store and I was trying to decide if I should get red paint or blue paint. What do you think I should get? It's like, red? Another guy comes up. Okay, my neighbor. Like last night, he was snoring so loud in his tent. I'm just wondering, is there a thing called sleep apnea? Because I think this guy's got it. Is there something we could do? Mo's like, yeah, just pinch his nose or something. Next, another guy comes, complain. And Jethro's like, timeout. I think this is where timeout was instituted for the first time. It's like, Moses, timeout. It's like, you're going to wear yourself out. This is ridiculous. You're one man. You're going to wear yourself out. Instead, if you can listen to your father-in-law, because we know father-in-laws are always right, you need to make captains of thousands, captains of hundreds, captains of tens. Make those guys your leaders. And if something becomes too difficult for them, then they could bring it to you. So you have a leader of 10 people. Small influence. These 10 people come up to him. It's like, hey, what kind of paint should I get? Whatever. Not a big deal. Next one, captain of hundreds. So these are larger influence. It's like 100 people. So think of 10 groups of 10. Now this guy can manage those people. And he's like, yeah, this is a serious problem. Let me take it to the leader of thousands. And he's like, yeah, this problem's too much. I can't figure it out. So then they take it to Moses. So that is basically how leadership began with Israel, where you get many judges, many saviors to be able to make decisions because they have wisdom. And they're like, you know what? Stop bugging your neighbor. Stop stealing his animals, or here's all this kind of stuff. Like, they could make these decisions, but once they got difficult, then they would go to Moses. Thank God for Jethro. Could you imagine? Moses would do this from sun up to sundown every single day, listening to the most ridiculous cases. Like this is like a small claims court for Moses. Let's see here. Children of Israel go to Mount Sinai. God speaks to Moses. Basically, the Israelites say, whatever God tells you, we will do it. So God's basically saying, okay, we'll see about that. Basically, God meets Moses on Mount Sinai to write everything out, write out the 10 commandments. And hey, look, we're like halfway through. This is actually amazing. So if you want an easy way to remember the 10 commandments where they are, it's basically halfway through the book of Exodus. It's in chapter 20. So here is the 10 commandments for Israel that they were to follow. And remember, this was written on 2 stone tablets on front and back. God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth below, or that is in the water underneath. I kind of wish Free Willy would read Exodus chapter 20 again, because I think some of the Catholics actually have the 10 commandments chopped up a bit. I think they get rid of the do not have any idols, and I think they chop up the 10th commandment and make it 2. It's kind of bizarre when you think about it. Thou shalt not have any other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, any likeness in heaven above, and thou shalt not bow thyself down to them, nor serve them. And I think we're actually entering into that arena where there will be people bowing down to idols and images. This is, I think, becoming a norm where we're actually entering into the latter days. Like I said earlier, we're on borrowed time. It won't be far-fetched when the Antichrist takes over the world for people to worship the one image, which is an image that is set up to look like the Antichrist that had a mortal wound. And I believe that Antichrist is also going to be possessed by the devil as well. But it's like we as humans are preparing ourselves to be able to worship an entity that is not God. And it's going to be in the shape of a human. I think we're talking about humans mixed with machine, Nephilim, drinking Nephilim juice, all kinds of crazy stuff. Like, this is where we get giants in the world, all kinds of stuff going on. That's during Jacob's trouble, and we're approaching it. So God says, thou shalt not bow yourself to them. I am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, and upon the third and fourth generation, showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days thou shalt labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath day of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. 6 days the Lord made the heaven and earth, and the sea, and all they that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath, and he hallowed it. Honor thy father and mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God hath given thee. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, and thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, neither neither covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. And all the people saw the thunderings, the lightnings, and the noise of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood far off. Then they said unto Moses, Speak thou with us, we will hear, but let not God speak with us, lest we die. And Moses said unto the people, Fear not, for God is come to prove you, that his fear may be before your faces, that ye sin not. And the people stood afar off, and Moses drew into the thick darkness where God was. Interesting, eh? And there's rules for building altars, laws regarding servants, laws regarding maidservants, laws regarding murder, laws regarding other offenses, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. This is an interesting thing. I think this is where people get things wrong. They think when Moses is saying eye for eye means if I get my eye gouged out by you, I have to gouge your eye out. No, it means value. It means worth. So if you are at work and your boss smokes you in the head and you actually lose your eye, well, your compensation is you're now free to go. And I think in some cases you actually got sent out with money, but you're actually released from whatever debt you're working off to pay me, whatever it is. You're under no obligation. You can go get employment somewhere else. You're free. You're free to go. You're free. You're basically, you've earned your freedom. So in situations like that, like for example, if an animal were to gorge another animal, like say an ox gorged another ox, then the owner of the ox that was known for gorging had to replace that ox. That was like eye for eye, tooth for tooth. It had to be of equal value. You couldn't give it a donkey. You couldn't give him a donkey. You had to replace the ox. And if it was known to gorge and it gorged a person, then that ox would be killed, and so would that person, especially if they were warned, hey, your ox is kind of out of control, and he's been known to push on people, to hurt people, and he actually killed someone. So now you are responsible for that animal, and not only does your animal get killed, but you get killed. And in fact, you could actually have a ransom for that as well. The guy can pay the family whatever they agreed upon. So you can actually ransom your life as well and try and restore things. So it wasn't always a capital offense right out of the gate, but depending on the situation, obviously, if you murdered someone, you needed 2 or more witnesses. Otherwise, it would be he said, she said. So you needed legit witnesses. So let's say you witnessed someone killing someone, or say you lied. Let's say you lied and you went before a Levite and you said, you know what? I saw Joe killing Frank. I saw him. And then there's no witnesses around. You're the only one. And you're like, yeah, I saw uh, Fred do it to Joe. Later, if the Levites find out that you're lying, that Fred actually didn't do it, you actually had to be stoned. Whatever death was going to happen, if it was burning or being stoned to death, if that was the accusation, hey, this guy murdered this guy, therefore he needs to be stoned to death, and you were that false witness, you actually had to be stoned to death. Why? It's to stop people from lying and creating false narratives that were not true. So imagine all the people that were bringing false accusations against Jesus Christ. Wow, I would not want to be them. That's all I'm saying. So that's what eye for eye, tooth for tooth means. It means of same value. If a servant got his tooth knocked out, he's free to go. He's free to go. Doesn't have to work for that guy anymore. So you can get into all kinds of complicated stuff. We'll say, well, that's not fair according to manpower, according to HR rules. You can't do that and blah, blah, blah. I'm just telling you what's in the Bible. As basically, look, if a guy was wrestling with another guy and they actually fell into a woman that was pregnant and she ended up miscarrying, but the child was okay, then he has to pay back stuff. But if the child dies, then I think that guy had to be killed or something like that. So it was very important to God about what happens to the woman, because if she gets into a tussle with a guy and he accidentally hits her or whatever and she loses her child, that's on him. That's on him. And then it talks about rape and all kinds of what the definition of rape is. And then in the Old Testament, the definition of rape was if there was a woman by herself and a guy goes in to be with her, to rape her because it's against her will, and she screams out, that guy is to be stoned to death. Why? Because she screamed out. If she doesn't scream, that could mean that they were actually part of it together, that they actually wanted to do something. But if she resists him and there was no one there to save her from her humiliation, and it gets found out later, she is not to be harmed. It is the guy that did it is to be stoned to death because he caused her great harm and she cried out and no one was there to deliver her. So that's in the Bible. Talks about all that stuff in there. So it's kind of interesting. Let's see. Where are we? So basically laws against using usury, like from the perspective of using it too much. It's one thing to have interest, but to use it too much was a little bit excessive. What do we talk about when we're saying usury? We're talking about interest. So let's say, for example, a person were to they were to sell their lamb. They're like, you know what, this lamb is actually pretty good, but I'm going to sell this lamb to the priest. The priest looks at the lamb and he goes, you know what, that lamb is pretty good. I will grade it at the highest value because I know you took care of your lamb, all this stuff. So I'm going to sell it to you for, let's say, 20 shekels. So then, or 10 shekels for easy math. So then the guy goes away. The next day he comes back and he's like, you know what? I changed my mind. I actually want to buy that sheep back. The Levite says, oh, you didn't see in the fine print. All sales were final. But I will sell you a sheep. And because we inspect every sheep that we bring in, they're pretty much going to be all of the same grade. You're just not going to get the sheep that you sold me yesterday because that one might be gone and it might be with another family or whatever it is. So they go, they grab a sheep, they bring it to that guy, and the guy looks at it, is like, yeah, it's pretty good. And then they tack on an extra 20% for that transaction. So that's usury. So this is what would happen. Somebody would sell a piece of land. Maybe they had some debt to pay. They give it to the Levites. Levite would give them cash. They go pay off their debt or whatever it is. Then they go buy the land back from the Levites, and there would be usury attached to that, usually 20%. We see this today. All the banks today operate on the same Levitical principle that is in the Bible, especially when it comes to the book of Leviticus. Leviticus is one of my favorite books. For example, you have the year of Jubilee, 50 years. So Moses says to the Levites, look, as the year of release approaches, don't get all crazy with your usury. Don't be weird. Just do the business deal. What does that mean? Well, as you're approaching year 48 and 49, and somebody comes up to want to buy a home or something, don't just charge them out the yin yang with interest because you know, oh, there's only 2 years left. They're not going to pay back their loan. It's only 2 years left. It's much better to give them a loan when they're 20 or 25 years old with a wife and 3 kids because they have a steady job than it is for a 70-year-old guy asking for a mortgage. Like, think about it today. Banks will be like, you can get a mortgage, but I'm going to charge you so much interest and whatever because you're a high risk. So at the end of Leviticus, we see vows, and all that means is basically whatever the agreement is between the person and the Levite. So let's say, and I'm just paraphrasing, but let's say a young man comes up to a priest and he looks at him. He's like, man, you look like a good worker. You're worth about 20 shekels or 30 shekels. An old guy comes up that's like 80. He's one stone's throw away from dying, asks for the same type of loan. The Levite is going to be like, high risk. Sorry. Same thing for a woman. She comes up asking for 20 shekels, same as the young man. And the Levites are like, no, I can't give you that much because you're young. And chances are you're going to get married and have kids. So I'm actually going to give you 5 shekels instead of 20. It's same thing for old people. Or maybe it's 10 shekels. And then for you, if a guy has 3 kids, he gets 5 shekels for each kid. 5, 10, 15. And then he has a wife, so he gets another 10. And then plus himself. So you're looking at about 35, 40 shekels for the entire family that the Levite can actually lend out to him. Why? Because he's a young working man. He's less risky. His credit score is actually really good. That's what banks do today. If you are a college student and you go to a bank for a mortgage, they're probably going to be like, I don't know. You got so much debt. Come back and see us once you pay off your student loan, or if you have a good job and once your credit score starts climbing, going up, then come talk to us. But if you're in high amounts of debt, your credit score goes down and you're not going to be able to get a proper loan. And if you get a loan, it's going to be with high interest. That's how banks work today. That's not unlike Leviticus. That's not unlike what Moses was saying. Hey, look, be careful when it comes to usury. Don't overburden these people with your interest. And I think this is why Jesus overturned the money changer tables, is because people would go to, let's say, Dan, and they're thinking, oh, it's too far for me to travel to Jerusalem, so I'm going to sell my lamb to the Levites here at this store, and they give me a bag of silver. Say it's 20 coins or whatever. Let's just say it's 20 shekels. and I go all the way to Jerusalem. And when I get there and I want to buy a lamb because I want to sacrifice a lamb or I want to eat with my family or whatever, and they're like, oh, sorry, that was the price in Dan. That's 20 shekels. But here it's 50. How much do you got? And they're like, I only got 20. It's like, sorry, you needed 50. And then they're like, now we can't celebrate the Passover. We can't celebrate any of these feasts because these Levites are overcharging us money. The exchange is not equal. The balance is not fair. It's not fair all over the place. And I think what Jesus was seeing was some of the stuff going on with the Pharisees and the leadership going all over, all over the temple area. They had money changers, they had animals, they had birds, cattle, all kinds of stuff there. And Jesus, like, my house is supposed to be a house of prayer, but you made it into a den of thieves. And that was like, I think that was like a week or two before he got killed on the cross. So he actually upset quite a few people. So let's see here. So basically, he talks about all the rules, ethics, observance of the 3 feasts, conquest of the land is going to be assured. Basically, listen to this angel, which is interesting. Then Moses says, beware of him and obey his voice, provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. That feels like the Holy Spirit leading the children of Israel into the promised land. It's kind of interesting because that's the only place where it says your transgressions will not be forgiven. And that echoes what Jesus said. It says there many sins will be forgiven of the Son of Man. But basically, again, paraphrasing, the Holy Ghost, blasphemy against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven. Interesting. Let's see. So now we get all the furnishings. We get the tabernacle being assembled. So basically, there's some people from the tribe of Judah that God puts wisdom in them to figure this stuff out. And then also from the tribe of Dan to figure stuff out. Basically, they build the Ark of the Testimony. They build the mercy seat. They build the table, all the furnishings, the bowls, the cups, the lids, everything. The tongs, everything is laid out with pure gold. All the wood, all the bars, everything. The curtains are being designed. They have hooks. They have clasps. They have the Danites working away. They have the women sewing loops and all kinds of stuff. It's actually kind of cool. Goat's hairs, badger skins over top of it. Now, scholars today will say there was no badgers in the wilderness for them to gather all the badgers to put badger skin. However, there was one breed of badgers that was quite popular in Egypt. That was the honey badger, known in Africa as the honey badger. So it would not be hard to imagine that if you're coming out of Egypt and you're basically taking all their silver, gold, clothing, all kinds of raiments, it wouldn't be hard to build a case to say that probably they had badger skins as well, because Egypt was also a massive trade route, not only for people caravanning through, but also for ships. Like, it was a very popular destination for ships. And don't forget, you have the Nile as well, to be able to bring all kinds of animals, all kinds of stuff from all over the place, not just from Egypt. So I don't have a problem that badger skins were put over top of the tabernacle to seal it up, because badger skins are basically waterproof. So it's kind of interesting. So I don't have a problem with that. So bars, hanging doors, hanging curtains, scarlet, blue, all kinds of the majestic colors, which is kind of interesting. All made from shittim wood. And then basically all the measurements and how the courts laid out. And the idea behind it is whenever Israel would camp somewhere, that Moses would set it up and they would stay there until the fire would leave. And then they would know time to pack up. So sometimes they could actually be in one area for like a year or two. They don't leave every single night. They might rest for like a month. They might rest for 6 months. They might rest for a year or 2 years. We don't know. But we know that whenever the fire stayed over the tabernacle, that's where they're staying. And then as soon as it would leave to go, they're like, okay, we're leaving. It could be at nighttime. It wasn't always during the day that they would journey. They would leave also at nighttime, which is interesting. And it was very terrifying for the Israelites at night because there were beasts of all kinds of sorts out in the wilderness. So Moses even reminds them in Deuteronomy saying, you remember how terrible that was, how scary it was. So you're not going to want to leave God if he's giving you a fire by night and smoke by day. You're not going to want to leave his presence because you're in the middle of the wilderness. You won't last a minute. So what's interesting is we get these people, the Danites, that are actually helping design the robe for Aaron and his sons. And it's interesting that there's a mitre that they get put on their head, and that mitre is almost like a healing plant in some ways. It's almost like what's the plant? What's that one that everybody likes so much, where basically you break a leaf and then you can put it on a cut? It actually makes you better. It's almost like that. And then there's actually a gold plate placed over the sons of Aaron, and it's like holiness to the Lord inscribed into gold, and it's like they're wearing mini crowns. Yeah, aloe plants. So that mitre is almost like symbolic of not only of healing in that, but also the idea of crushing, like a crown. Almost like what they put on Jesus was like the opposite, because it had thorns. And when they pushed it on, some of them were like 6-inch spikes. You're not getting that off. So this mitre is kind of mimicking a crown that's being put on the Levites. And then there's also a gold plate put on them saying holiness to the Lord. And it's like everybody is like mini king priests, if you will, even though that's not their title. But it kind of gives you that illusion that they're being put crowns on them, even though they're ephods and their robe, and they have basically stones on their shoulders to represent the tribe. They have a plate that goes across that has stones from each one of the tribes, which is kind of interesting in itself. I did a video on that it kind of feels like these stones actually light up at various times, especially when the leadership is trying to figure out which way they should go. It almost feels like it can light up like Hebrew letters, like certain tribes would light up or whatever. And the only reason why I say that is because there's something special about this ephod or this plate, that they would actually insert all the stones into a plate that they actually wear. And they would use that. King David actually used it. Lord, should I go and fight? And then there would be like one word, like go. And he would use the ephod to tell him what he should do, which is interesting. So they would use that almost like a Simon Says, and it lights up at different points in this. That's it. I can't quite prove it yet, but you can't help but see it in scripture that it kind of feels like those stones were placed in a certain birth order from oldest to youngest for a reason other than just to look good, like just a furnishing. But I think there was some kind of communication between the Israelites and God through that. And then also Moses would always go before the ark to speak to God, and God would speak to them through the ark. which I find interesting. It's almost like a radio. It's kind of interesting in itself. So that's the mitre. Garments for Aaron's sons. Anointing of the priests, which is pretty interesting. So basically, they had to wash all their garments. They had to wash themselves from head to toe in order for them to enter into the tabernacle. And no one else could go in. Then it goes through all the first ram being sacrificed, the second ram, all the wave offerings that anybody that brings in animals for them to sacrifice, they could eat some of them. They have offerings for sin offerings, continual burnt offerings. Like when the menorah gets lit by Moses himself, it stays lit. Moses was actually the first person to actually set up the tabernacle. He set up everything. He put the candle in the right place with the 7 branches. He put the bread out, the plate, all kinds of stuff. He set it all up. He set up the whole tent, put the bars in everything, and basically said to Aaron, here's your template. This is how you do it. This is how you take it apart. This is how you wrap everything up with the badger skins. And you don't allow the other family members to be able to look at how you're taking it apart. But once it gets wrapped up, then they can actually take it and load it onto the wagons. And then they can also bear the ark and carry it throughout the wilderness. But there was a formality to taking it down, and there was a formality to setting it up. So we have a brass lever, which is kind of interesting because, again, if you're talking about purification, a lot of the utensils were made out of bronze, and there was a bronze lever, which is interesting when you look this thing up and you start thinking about how it was invented. They actually would take their feet and put it in where the foot pedal is, and you can actually depress it, and you could actually use your hands to wash yourself. And it's very similar to how doctors wash their hands today, is they use a foot pedal, they step on it, and they can wash their hands without any contamination. And it's interesting that God invented that for the Levites, and their job was actually to inspect homes, to inspect people, to see if they have leprosy, maybe they're contagious, maybe they got some virus or something going on. They would go into a home. This is why I say Leviticus is all about governance. It's about how to run a church, it's how to run a hospital, and how to run a bank. So these Levites would go to a person's home, and if they would say something like, hey, we have mold because we just moved into these homes. They were already built. Don't know if they're built by giants. Don't know if they actually sacrificed their firstborn into the walls. We don't know, but there's mold in that wall there. So then the Levites would say, if you scrape the wall, I'll come back in a week, or you come back to me in a week and let me know, is there mold? And if the mold comes back, you're going to have to bulldoze the whole house. Now, I know there weren't bulldozers back then, but they would have to level it and burn it. Same thing if they had raiments, if they had garments, raiments, clothing, and they brought it to the priest and said there's a piece of mold showing up, then the priest would be like, okay, you have to wash it and all this stuff. And then if it comes back, you have to burn it. It's a plague. It's a mold plague. It's going to spread. So that's what the Levites would have to contend with, including sores. It's like, oh, where do you have a sore? I have a sore on my forehead and it's spreading. Okay, well, let's isolate you and let's see if we can clean it up and if it continues to spread. If it doesn't spread, it was just a boil, it was just a sore. But if it spreads, it's chances are it's leprous or cancerous or whatever was going on back then. So that was what the Levites had to deal with, and that's probably why their diet was so strict as well, because you didn't want to just go out and eat some uncooked ham, because you would probably all die. You get tapeworms and all kinds of crazy stuff. So everything had to be cooked, everything had to be stored properly. Remember, there's no refrigeration in the desert. So their diet had to be pretty strict. Otherwise, you're going to get sick Botulism comes to mind, all kinds of stuff. Flesh-eating disease, foot and mouth disease, animal diseases, all kinds of stuff. So you have to protect yourself. And the Israelites did it right. God laid this all out. It's actually quite beautiful when you think about it. So then Moses goes up. We talked about this. Basically, Moses comes down and they're all naked having a party. And Moses confronts Aaron. How can you do this? Aaron's like, well, I just threw the gold in. They brought me the gold. I threw it in and out came this calf. It was weird. It's actually the most amazing thing. And I just made them go naked as well. It's kind of weird. So Moses made the world's first wilderness milkshake. He ground up the golden calf into dust, mixed it with the river that was beside them, or the water, and gave them a straw and said, Bon appetit. It's probably where that saying came from, and made them drink it. That's how much of a temper Moses had. He made them drink the golden calf. It's crazy, right? Every time I see Sunday Lily, I always think of a Sunday. Gets me kind of hungry. I feel like having a blizzard right now. So God renews his covenant, goes back up another 80 days or another 40 days. So 80 days without food and water. Tells you it was miraculous that God was able to sustain him. And then he came up with another 10 commandments. I think of the movie The History of the World with Mel Brooks. Don't encourage anyone to see it, but I remember him coming down the mountain with, I have 15 commandments, and he dropped 5. He's like, 10 commandments. I always remember that. It's kind of funny. So Moses destroyed the first 10 commandments, and they have another 10. So it'd be funny if he came down saying, I have 20 commandments, drops 2 stone tablets. I have 10 commandments for you. But yeah, so basically God rewrites it on both sides with his own finger, the 10 commandments, and renews his covenant with them. God begs God, saying, don't leave us, like, go with us, please. If you're not going to go with us, then blot me out of your book. And Moses said, you know what? Or God said, I could make you into an even mightier nation than them. And and Moses is like, if you do that, then the Egyptians are going to be right, because they're thinking the only reason why you took them out is to punish them out in the middle of nowhere. And they would be right. So God repented. That means turned away. That doesn't mean he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I guess you're right, Moses. It means he turned away from destroying Israel. Thanks be to God because of Moses. Moses was the most humblest man on the planet. And I think Joshua probably wrote that in. So they were not to make covenants with inhabitants because they were worshiping other gods. There were also giants in the land. They were sacrificing their firstborn children, and they were not to intermarry. We'll see how quickly that falls apart in the book of Judges. But the rule was that you could only marry within your tribes. So within the 12 tribes of Israel, you could only marry. Now, if you took over a piece of territory and you happen to like the woman, that's one thing, because then you could marry her. But she would have to mourn a little time because she probably lost her family members. She'd have to shave her head and mourn for a while. And I think this is why Paul is saying, like, if a woman comes into the church and she has her head shaved, doesn't it kind of look like she's mourning? Because that's what the tradition was of women. You're either a prostitute or you're mourning. You're mourning the loss of someone. So you'd shave your head. And then God even says, doesn't it look like if you look at nature, doesn't it seem weird that men would walk in all feminized with long blonde hair or long dark hair? Doesn't that look kind of weird? And then you have women that shave their head. Doesn't nature kind of say like it's the opposite? I'm not talking about Will Smith's wife that has a disease or whatever that she has to keep her head shaved. There are some women that actually look beautiful with their head shaved. That's not what Paul is talking about here. And there are some men, like think of Thor from the Avengers. He looks pretty cool with his long blonde hair. It's not what we're talking about here. Paul was talking about something that was going on in the Corinthian church. We haven't even got into, we didn't talk about the, what's it called? The vow. Oh, I forget what it's called. That Samson made. The Nazarite vow. That's coming up later. And I think a lot of people misunderstand the Nazarite vow. And we'll talk about that when I go into the book of Leviticus, which is a fun book to go through. But God basically tells everyone to gather furnishings, like whatever you can dedicate, gold, silver, clothing, material, whatever, to put together the tabernacle. It has to be a free, willing offering. And that's the thing about Christianity, that we have to get this. Everything we do is we do it freely. We do it freely, meaning we do it because we want to, not because we have to. Jesus Christ died on the cross for you willingly. Willingly. He wasn't forced. He was the only one that was able to lay down his life and to pick it back up again. And he willfully gave his life up for you. So here Moses is saying, look, if anyone wants to give up some of your possessions to put this thing together, this tabernacle, that would be great. So they did that. They coughed up all kinds of onyx stones, sachets, boards, pillars, sockets, art, like everything was able to be built. And in fact, they gave so much that the Danites and the Judites and the I was going to say Judaizers, but the people from the tribe of Judah, they said, stop. We got too much. Imagine having that where people give too much. So they said, stop. We have enough. We have plenty. So the tabernacle workmen were chosen. There were also women that were actually very good at their craft, helping out. And so, yeah, they gathered everything. They made the goat's hair. They made all the bars. They make the Ark of the Covenant. They had a Danite to actually shape the cherubim so that they actually face each other and look down at the mercy seat, which is kind of interesting in itself. All made out of gold. They made an altar for burnt offering, the brass laver, which I told you about, the court, and basically everything was all put together, and then Moses actually set it up, which is pretty cool. So that's it. So basically the last chapter is Aaron and his sons were anointed, and basically Moses set up the whole tabernacle, and the cloud of the Lord was upon the tabernacle by day, and the fire was on it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all their journeys. That's not bad. 2.5 hours. We got through the book of Exodus. The next book I do will be Leviticus. So I hope you guys got something out of it. I know it was a long video, but maybe you can go back and watch it again and just sit there with your Bible and kind of skim through the book as well. I like doing that every once in a while. I like just kind of going through it and going, this is kind of cool or whatever. It just brings things to mind as you go through the entire Bible. So I hope you enjoyed this. Hope you got something out of this. I think the next video I'll do will probably talk a little bit more about some of the Black Swan events that are coming down the pipes. But if you like this type of Bible study where we're actually just kind of skimming through the entire book of the Bible, can you let me know that by giving a thumbs up and just let me know that, hey, you like this kind of thing? That'll help the algorithm know as well that you like this, and maybe this video will get shared with other people as well. So thank you guys. Appreciate you guys a lot. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in another video. Bye for now. Oh, yeah, don't forget. Actually, you know what? One thing I got to do is I forgot halfway through. I was going to put a little promo video of Feed My Sheep today, so I'm going to put that on right now to end the show. But one other thing I wanted you guys to know is tomorrow morning, we're actually doing an update of Feed My Sheep Today. We're back on schedule of doing it on every Friday. We took a break last Friday, but join us tomorrow. It'll be Bob Barber, Ed, and myself. And we're also going to be having a guest as well. That's tomorrow morning at 12 Eastern. So join us tomorrow. I'm going to leave you with this video. So thanks again for watching. I'll see you in another video. Bye for now.
My brothers and sisters in Christ, Bob Barbie here. From all of us here at Feed My Sheep Today, I want to come on here and say thank you for all of you who have supported Christian missions through Feed My Sheep Today. For over a decade and a half now, Feed My Sheep Today has been reaching the lost with free Bibles and humanitarian relief aid here in the United States and all around the world. Millions upon millions have been added to the Ark of Jesus Christ through Feed My Sheep Today since its inception. And now, since we are in the final days before the rapture resurrection, the numbers of people looking for the truth of Jesus Christ has grown exponentially, and we need your help. Through your financial support, we will be able to provide the amount of Bibles that we need to provide, along with the humanitarian relief aid that our new brothers and sisters in Christ need in these final hours. And family, every little bit helps, so thank you all so much for your support. If you feel that tug in your heart right now, that's just the Holy Spirit saying, hey, we can use you here right now. And if that's you, all you need to do is go to our official website, feedmysheeptoday.org. And you can give from there. There will even be options to become a monthly sustainer, which we greatly need. The link for this site will be in the description box below, or you could just simply text SHEEP to 801-801, and you can give quickly by phone as well, or send your donation by mail. Feed My Sheep Today, P.O. Box 568, Cherville, Indiana 46375. That address is in the description box below or on our official website. So if you're ready to make your global impact, Feed My Sheep Today will achieve this for you. And very quickly, from the time that you give, there's about a 3-day turnaround to the time that the missionary receives the funds. Feed My Sheep Today is here for you to help you finish strong in building God's kingdom today. Thank you all so much for your much needed support, and may our Heavenly Father bless you all.